welcome everyone to the Media Roundtable Industry Edition. If you've been keeping up with us, we've spent the last few years talking to leading voices in the podcast universe about what they create, why they create it, and the impact they want it to have on the world. We're mixing it up a little bit today, and we're testing a new format. So instead of our typical one-on-one interview style, we're experimenting with a new concept. So we're calling it Media Roundtable Industry Edition, where we'll cover and comment on the top news stories in media with a little help from my friends at Oxford Road. We're always going to have a bit of a preference for audio-focused media news, but we'll cover some broad topics as well. This is a true roundtable format, and like we say in our name, this is our industry edition, so it's going to be less focused on creators and more about how media and audio experts can adapt to the news of the day. As usual, I'm your host, Dan Granger, and I'm joined by my fellow agents of influence, starting with Jennifer Laine, our head of marketing and special projects at Oxford Road. Welcome, Jennifer.
Hi, thank you.
We also have Stu Redwine, who's our vice president of creative services at Oxford Road. Welcome, Stu.
It's good to be here. Thank you.
And our old friend, Kyle Jelinek, senior account lead at Oxford Road and also editor-in-chief of The Influencer. And I should also say that Jennifer is the executive producer of the Media Roundtable and has been since inception. So you've got some familiar faces and voices, and Stu just hosted our last podcast, incidentally. So it's the usual suspects. Kyle, we're glad to have you with us as well.
Happy to be here, Dan.
Okay, so welcome everybody. One big story this week that I don't think we need to cover is the news that now Elon's out with Twitter. He's out, he's in, he's out. And what's really happening? We could probably do a whole segment on that. But the way I look at it is it'll be news when the thing lands. But right now I feel like we're just watching a negotiation and like trying to follow the bouncing ball. And we have no idea. These guys are so many steps ahead of what we're reading about. It's not even worth talking about. So I think the big thing that we should all be spending some time about it, thinking about is the changing economic conditions around us and how that's impacting brands, how that's impacting media and areas of focus. And so the first one, there was a story that came out. It's from our friends at Insider Intelligence, saying that brand values fail to entice inflation-worried consumers. And so the summary of the story that came out basically said that they've tested how purpose-driven ads are performing and that they're not so well received during economic downturns. Surprise, surprise. Consumers are now de-emphasizing social values when it comes to their spending habits and focusing on switching to brands with, you guessed it, lower prices. So big takeaway is, you could see this one coming, right? But across the advertising industry, I mean, even if you think about it, think about what we're doing on this show. Historically, it's been focused on purpose. And what we're doing is we're staying true to our purpose. We're still trying to advance voices that bridge divides and bring people together. And that is core to our business now. But not everything that we're going to be talking about in the marketplace can be so focused on social good. We have to do the social good, but also make sure we're addressing the wolf that is at the door for many people in the advertising community, including our clients. So as priorities shift, as the marketplace shifts, and there's so much uncertainty, I really think this is one indicator of many that we're going to see, where brands that made large promises over the last 2 years about what they stand for and how they're not just focused on sales, they're really also focused on the community. I think this is the time that the rubber really hits the road. And I predict that we're going to see a lot of brands getting called out for promises made to communities that they can no longer prioritize because they're trying to just keep the ship afloat. What do you guys think about this one?
Well, I think messaging when it comes to a recession or a downturn, a slowdown, you see this trade-off for consumers that, when times are good, we want to talk about luxuries, message luxuries, talk about how I'm saving you time. And when times are bad, it's all about how I can save you money. And that is what you're going to continue to see as we move into what's looking like a period of a big slowdown. As far as paying off on their promises, I mean, that's an interesting angle. I wonder how much, does anybody really care about that when really what they're trying to get is just, hey, what's the best value that I can get out there?
I think in addition to the creative approach is the types of media that people are more interested in now. Like during the boom, we're expanding, we're testing, we're doing some big brand initiatives. Now people are kind of tightening their belts a little bit and saying, we need to look at the performance. Is this actually driving the needle? And I think we're going to see a shift into the types of media that advertisers are investing into.
Well, and you're on the front lines in the advertising community. I guess we all are to an extent. Are you hearing a difference in the needs of the marketplace or the priorities where there were things like, for example, one of our key issues we talk about is brand safety and suitability. Is there less of that conversation happening now? And are you starting to see a difference in prioritization in the market?
Brand safety is still paramount. I'm not seeing much of a shift there, but again, like we were seeing big initiatives like, yeah, we'll do this 360 plan with a specific program where we're going to do articles and we're going to be on their podcast. We're going to be on their YouTube. We're going to sponsor all these things. Now it's going to come down to quantifiable performance. And that's what I'm seeing that shift is more about, I need to show that every dollar I put in makes $2 back.
Yeah, and I imagine that some of the values and stakeholder capitalism driven decisions that have been made, I have a feeling some of that is going to loosen slightly. Now, my position on this, both in speaking to our audience, but also in thinking about how we conduct business at our own company, is that it's always about expectation management. And it was important to me in the last few years that we didn't promise that we were going to do something that we really weren't prepared to back up. I know that a lot of companies started pledging dollars or pledging resources toward different initiatives that were going to represent a social good. But then what started happening even before, and these new changes in the economy, you started seeing third parties auditing those things and calling them out and saying, are they really on track for this? Or are they dropping the ball? And so I think there's always going to be accountability. At the same time, I also kind of think it's a little bit like a publication that runs a retraction. It's nice that they put it on record. Do as many people hear about it? Probably not. But my counsel to brands that are trying to now go, oh crap, look at all the things I promised the market a couple of years ago. What do I do now? I think we have to stay true to the promises made, but clearly the way that we address different things, even brand safety, you can look at it from it's for the good of the people around you. It's for the community, but there also has to be a highlighting of the economic benefits that are going to help you with your bottom line, such as limited, lowering turnover because people at your company don't align with your values, or having to cut off channels that your companies become reliant on. I think there are always economic reasons to do the things that we do. And the idea of, to me, the only way to make any of the purpose-driven stuff work is if you don't do it at the expense of profit. They should be able to work together. The concept of doing well for your company by doing good should be working together. And if they're not, we're about to see a level setting of that. And I think a lot of people are going to find out that it's harder to walk the walk in hard times. So that's my position on that. Now, moving on, Jennifer, you've got a story to introduce for us. You want to tell us what you got?
Yeah, it sort of builds on what Kyle was mentioning earlier, but to that last point, I wanted to sort of propose a question to the group about whether or not like consumer demand will shift as it relates to purpose-driven marketing with the recession coming forward, whereas like it was driven by consumer demand before. And so I want your brand values to align with my brand values. Otherwise, I don't want to support this product. Like, yeah, I understand from the brand's perspective as to why they may need to cut some of those initiatives if it's eating up their budget or it's sort of chipping away at profitability. But do you think that the consumer shift will match that, or will the demand from the consumer side still be there?
I think
So, yeah, go ahead.
I think part of what might go on here, well, just a quick thought, is like this idea that Zoomers those born approximately 1997 to 2012 are motivated more to give their dollars to companies that have values and causes that they believe in. If we see a tough economic time here, which it's like we're the prophets of doom and gloom here, but whatever, let's say it continues and it's rough, will Zoomers continue to put their dollars into the companies that have the values that they believe in, or are they going to be more driven by the pricing, the costs? And so it might be a generational thing, is what I'm thinking, Jennifer, that it's not going to be everybody spending their money the same way, and this might be a nice little test environment to see, oh wow, they keep giving their money to the companies that have the values they believe in, even if it's not necessarily the best price during an economic downturn.
Yeah, and I'm going to totally disagree with that, to say that to say that I think that they'll only be able to hold the line and not worry about price to the extent that they're insulated from those prices. But, if you just graduated from college and all of a sudden your starting salary is worth 20% less than it was a couple of years ago, and your parents are not supporting you, all of a sudden you start to look at the world a little bit differently. In fact, the article that, that kicked off this discussion said very clearly, commitment to brand ethos and purpose is taking a back seat as customers prioritize lower prices. So at the end of the day, everybody, it's like the Tyson quote, everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face. Well, yeah. Everybody's about to get some version of a punch to the face. Probably not what we saw in 2008. A lot of us worked through that. That was a different environment. That was crisis driven. We just had several crises, but this is not the result of a crisis. So it's a little more subtle. But when you can't afford to fill up your tank, you start to prioritize yourself first. I think that's just people. So to me, it's incumbent. Go ahead.
No, I understand at the end of the day, it's just a math decision for a lot of these consumers, but this is the first generation where we have seen such a personal drive towards values-driven brands. And I wonder if that tail off will be more slight, since generations before it wasn't necessarily as much of a focus.
I would imagine that if we had the research in front of us, and let's say that, boomers were 20% affected by that and Zoomers are 80% affected by that, everybody's going to go down probably, 20 or 30% from where they were. Right. So I'm sure that the rankings would still be the same, but I think as you come face to face with the reality of these things, everybody's going to need to start making economies if things keep continuing the way that they do. And how bad will it get? We don't know. We might already be in it. A lot of people are saying we're already there. So who knows?
I read an article in Marketing Brew this week about, with the looming recession, brands are shifting their spend towards influencer. Great article. It talked about how consumers will stop sort of searching online and going to their e-commerce sites, and being able to retarget will die down a little bit because of user activity. That being said, they're still going to follow their influencers because those channels could be free, whether they're on TikTok or on Instagram, on YouTube, or even on podcast. And so putting brand dollars where the consumers will continue to be spending their time, and cutting back on different sites where you're looking to retarget has been a huge shift that we've already seen coming. And I think this is interesting for us specifically as a hot take for marketers, is like really approaching your influencer strategy from a holistic and 360 point of view. Maybe you're advertising on podcasts, but they have a newsletter or Instagram channel or YouTube channel, and you may not be present in those places, or vice versa, where you may be following somebody on YouTube, but you aren't necessarily putting ad spend behind podcast dollars where they have a voice there. So I'd love to hear from the team, specifically Kyle, as it relates to if he's seen this trend for any of our clients so far, and Stu, about like what messaging changes could look like across channel, and what this means for like larger influencing marketer trends.
Yeah, I mean, influencer marketing is exploding. I just saw a report that came through today on the consumer take on influencers. And it said 70% of consumers make purchases as a result of an influencer that they believe in. It's massive. 82% of marketers say that their influencer marketing campaigns are working. I think we're going to see more and more of this, and more diversification into other areas like Instagram, potentially Facebook, but podcasts. I mean, we're seeing more and more of that. in our clients and how they're shifting dollars maybe away from more branding initiatives to these, very influencer driven platforms.
Yeah, and with influencer in general, I think obviously you feel like you have a more personal relationship, and so you buy into the brand and the brand message in a more significant way. But I think that's especially interesting when it comes to podcasts, which is the most intimate channel when it comes to marketing. And so, yeah, you already have a personal relationship, but with them legitimately, like in your head and in your ear, that may hold true to a certain, to a higher extent. What do you think, Stu? The genius behind creative messaging?
Oh, hardly. I think it is incredibly intimate. In a conversation with one of the largest radio hosts, I remember when they pointed that out to me, that, it is inside your ear. It doesn't get more intimate. And that goes back to the beginning of time when it comes to influence, is how much credibility the person has with you. And so, we went through this cycle where it's like, you can remember, corporations are people too. And I think, these things swing from one end to the other. And I think that we're at this place now in this phase of marketing where we do want to know that the person is real, that they're authentic, and authentic in that, like, not overplaying that word. But you do, like you said, you feel like you have a relationship with them. You feel like you know them. And I think the thing is, the very best ones you do, I do think that they're really open. And so it makes a lot of sense to continue to invest your dollars there. And I think the trick when it comes to the messaging with them is it real? Is it something that they would use themselves? Have you done everything that you can to get them to use it, to touch it, to feel it, to experience it? Can they talk about it with veracity that is something that they've used? And don't go overboard in giving them endless amounts of information on your product, right? You just keep it super succinct and let them do the thing that they're the ones that have the relationship. They're the ones that understand that intimacy with their audience. And so the trick is to make it as simple as possible for them to be able to communicate your brand, your solution to their audience.
So I'm just going to chime in on this one as well, and no disagreement with what's been said. But, I think about Ronald Reagan endorsing cigarettes 75 years ago. Endorsements have been around for a long time. Now we call it influencer marketing, but really, what is it? It's taking a channel or a vehicle that we use to convey information that's ad supported, and instead of bringing in a brand to say, hey, here's Trident, a word from Trident. We're saying, let me tell you how much I love Trident, whatever format that is, whether it's social media, print media, it's been going on forever. And the goal with all advertising is to transfer trust from the brand to the consumer. When the consumer trusts the brand, they're more likely to purchase. And if somebody they're already familiar with says that they like something and they recommend it, it's going to shorten the distance to transfer that trust. And so the model's been here forever. It's not going away. We just figured out ways to multiply it and scale it so that now you can have an infinite number of influencers engaged. But because the media impressions are for sale, it's always going to be a premium asset to just convert those to being delivered through the lens of somebody that the consumer might already know and trust. I think that it's a safe bet that the channel is going to keep increasing for, till we're not running ads anywhere anymore, which is the end of time.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, like, yeah. They're like we've said, there are no more powerful words in advertising than I use this, and you should too. Yeah. Like that is the deal. And you go 300 years BC, and persuasion is achieved by the speaker's personal character when the speech is so spoken as to make us think him credible. This whole transfer of trust thing has been around for quite a while. And it's so talking about going into new channels and monetizing them, my head has been opened up recently. I think I'm late to the game, but there's a few stories here about non-intrusive audio ads in games. And I think the noteworthy thing is that Global a large media and entertainment group from across the pond has invested in Odeo, which is one of the big companies in the space. There's also Audio Mob, is a company in this space where they're putting non-intrusive ads into games, mobile gaming. So think puzzle games, think word games. Big success story was in word games over here in the US. Their ability to sell diapers to new mothers that, like driving a vehicle, audio ads, the way radio has worked so well is that your eyes are engaged. You are doing something else. So the only kind of message you can get's got to be auditory. Well, with games, one of the biggest complaints as it's become an advertising space is it's visual. So it distracts you from the very thing you're doing. What these folks at Odeo, and then you've got Global investing in it, and Audio Mob have figured out is, we can serve them an audio ad and they can keep doing the game that they're wanting to play. And we all know the gaming market is huge. And it's exciting if you can listen to podcasts about this, read the stories. But my question is, okay, is this another one of these things that sounds really exciting right now, like Clubhouse, and it fades away? Or is there really something to this that, oh, wow, the entire gaming market could be broken open by serving them audio ads?
I'll chime in here after just disclosing to you all that I don't play video games except for Tetris. That's my only game. But I do believe in the format for ad delivery. I think one of the things, it's not a question of like, would people put ads there or would they respond to them? It's really just a question to me of critical mass. Do we have enough concentration of consumers that could hear the ads in an environment that can be controlled and scaled? And if so, then I think it's a foregone conclusion. I remember the first time I went to a hockey rink and saw that at a pro hockey game, they figured out how to put ads underneath the ice. I'm like, anywhere that they can stick an ad, they're going to do it. Right. So the fact that, audio's having a moment, it's, I've seen it go from like the redheaded stepchild of media to like all of a sudden audio is real cool now. I think there's absolutely going to be a demand for it, and knowing just the numbers on how gaming is not going away, it's becoming just a given, like streaming services. It's like everybody but me is doing it. I think this is absolutely going to happen. I think it's an organic way to tie things in. And what I'm really interested to see is when it jumps over and starts transitioning to commerce, to where you're playing the game, you're hearing the ad, you can speak to the ad, respond to the ad, and they're going to send stuff to your house as a result of it and charge your credit card. That's where this thing starts to really become viable, I think.
Well, and some of the stuff they're playing with is it gives you some kind of bonus in the game. So exactly. How about Hanes gives you the invisibility underwear? Now you're able to slide around in that first-person shooter with invisible Hanes on. Are you more inclined to go buy your Hanes at the store?
Did you make that up?
After that, I did.
Okay, we should go talk to Hanes about it.
I'm telling you, yeah.
But can you see the underwear and the?
No,
because that would ruin it. They could.
The cloak disappears as well when you have invisibility.
You like that?
I think. I also wonder then, like, if you look at sort of the Hulu model, like, will gamers be able to pay a premium to not have to listen to ads and not have to hear ads, and like,
of course,
what those models end up looking like in the future? Because if I were a gamer, I definitely wouldn't want to be interrupted by like a Hanes commercial. I would feel like the game sold out and I would have to go somewhere else.
So some other I'm telling you, like, I went into a deep dark hole over the weekend listening. There's a lot out there you can listen to, and Audio Boom has done a great job of getting on quite a few podcasts. But they've done some of their own studies, and they released a white paper to the IAB that, as far as they've seen, they're saying 100% of people don't stop playing the game when they're served the audio ad, and that their post survey where they go, "Did you notice the ad?" And the person's like, "No, I didn't really notice the ad." But then when they question them about what the content of the ad was, they are able to recall it. So it's an interesting space. There is this question of, if you turn the audio off in the game, or if you turn the audio off on your phone, or how can they guarantee that they were served it? But it does sure feel like audio is having its heyday. And what are other areas like gaming that audio ads could be served in?
I think it's going to keep getting more intrusive, and eventually it's just going to be like Michael Savage shouting at you about how you need to buy prostate medication. Like unless you pay the fee to turn that off. But anyway, hey, let's move to the next one. Kyle, you got something for us, and I think this one's important.
Yeah, I mean, TikTok has been in the news yet again, and not because of the content that they're providing, but it's more about the privacy concerns. In fact, there was an article that came out in Dispatch last week that essentially warned marketers to just stop advertising on TikTok, because essentially anybody using the platform is being dissected in China right now. All their data is being consumed, analyzed, and there's a big concern in privacy here in the States. And while TikTok is saying, oh, we're going to revisit this, we're going to create some controls and make sure that we're not leaking your private data. I think right now, if I was a marketer, I would not be advertising on TikTok, just given all the news that's coming out. In fact, I read an article just today that in Europe, they're completely banning the platform altogether, in fact, due to the same privacy concerns.
So this has a lot of, I think, overlapping implications that align with what we've been trying to do on this show for the last 2 years, which is help advertisers be more mindful about what they're supporting. And what's interesting is that so much of the conversation has been about polarization within the United States. One party sees the other party as not just wrong, but also evil, and we got all this infighting, right? And the biggest problem with all of it is that it makes us vulnerable. While we're squabbling internally, if you look overseas, we are a much more vulnerable target because we're not paying attention. We're a little bit asleep at the wheel. And Prof G is by no means, he is not a conservative guy. His is not a friend of the Republican Party. And even in the article that he just wrote about this, he called TikTok a Trojan stallion. And when Prof G decides to break something down, usually it's a meaningful topic. But great article if you have a chance to read it. But what he says is basically that people like Ted Cruz are right about this. Donald Trump was right about this. He goes on to call him a man-child. So he's not a fan. He disagrees with him about just about everything. But on this issue, you're seeing people on both sides of the aisle that are saying, hold on, I think we have a problem here. And now we're in advertising, right? And we've seen the rise of social. We've seen Google and Facebook basically eat the world. And now you see TikTok is the next thing coming up behind them. And this is significant. I think there's a lot of appeal for brands, and I think there's a lot of appeal for us to engage with this. So one of the other points I just want to share that Galloway said is he's like, there are a lot of young people that are very concerned about big tech doing work for our government or our military. And yet there is no discussion in youth culture today about what are we doing to protect from global threats, from global security threats. Do we care about what big tech is doing to align other countries against us and to manipulate us? But really what you can see, what he breaks down very tactically is the subtle ways that a group like TikTok can use algorithms to play up divisions and to make us more upset with each other and to really hurt the brand of America. So I thought it was very compelling. It seems like it's very important. And as far as like, okay, what's actionable here for marketers, I think it's the same blueprint as we have when there's a controversy on a show that you're sponsoring. If you're on TikTok, now would be a good time to hit pause and to really assess what's the impact here. Listen to the promises that are being made to anonymize the data. But do we really think that if the Chinese government doesn't let their own people use TikTok and gets to see all of our data, that this is going to get safe anytime soon? Probably not. So now's the time to hit pause. And if you're thinking about going in there and you're going, well, that could be a good channel for us, you may be creating a dependency for your business that's actually going to work against the interests of our country. inadvertently. So I would encourage anybody that's thinking about it to slow down, to take your time, and to really know what you're getting yourself into. And in most cases, just don't do it. If you haven't started, don't. If you're there, hit pause and reassess this thing, because I think we're creating a real liability here. And all the polarization just opens the pathway for things like this to really undermine our democracy in catastrophic ways. Anybody else have thoughts on this?
You covered
You said it all.
I mean,
It's a
I
big
think
deal.
there's, yeah, in one of these advertising history books, The Mirror Makers, there's a quote from like 100 years ago. And I just remember I guess we could attribute it in the notes, but it's advertising has 1,000 principles, one purpose, and no morals. It's really interesting that, that was said. And it's like, let's stop and think. And that's what I hear you saying, is just stop and think, what is going on? Because it can be good. It can be really, really good. And we're fishing in these holes and we're catching really big fish, but at what is at stake? What is at cost? That's what I hear you saying. It's a pause moment.
Yeah, this is a moment to pause and seriously reflect, because, everybody will talk about Zuckerberg is, he's Palpatine. Everybody loves to hate Zuckerberg, and that's fine. There may be a lot of merit to the criticisms about him. But at the end of the day, you're talking about American companies versus somebody who will not allow their own people to consume something, but they're very happy for us to consume it and very happy to have all the information about every one of us that consumes. I mean, this is not a show addressing consumer behavior as much, but you might want to think twice about using TikTok, because guess who has access to everything that you're doing? So yeah, it's a big one. And I'm sure we'll have more to cover on this topic. Stu, why don't you help move us along?
Of course. Yeah. Just in this past week, one of the story that I pulled out was in light of the tragic events that have happened in Uvalde and then over the 4th of July holiday. These at times like these, brands still are continuing to do what they're doing, getting their message out there. And there was some uproar over the Dallas Cowboys announcing a partnership with Black Rifle Coffee, right on the heels, a day after a mass shooting. And a lot of folks had a big problem with that. And I mean, this does happen. And I think there's something to unpack there, but really the thought that I had in thinking about it and thinking back to the Wild Turkey, putting an ad on the Sobercast, is this, idea from psychology of the bystander effect, that, in 1964, there was a woman that was murdered in New York City, and everybody that was listening to it, they could hear it, were thinking, oh, somebody else is going to do something about it. And so when it comes to our marketing campaigns, our promotional calendars, what's going on with current events, is everybody involved thinking someone else is minding the store, watching to go, hey, does it really make sense tomorrow for us as the Dallas Cowboys to announce our partnership with Black Rifle Company with the names of some of their coffee flavors right on the heels of a mass shooting? Or should we think about this and maybe delay the announcement a few days?
Yeah, I think this also feeds into the very first topic we brought up. It's sort of a difference between nice to have and table stakes, and situations like these are sort of table stakes. Like purpose-driven marketing really does matter in the grander scheme of things, but at the same time, somebody has to stay on top of it. And bringing up your point about Spotify and Wild Turkey from 2 months ago, I mean, not being careful and not going that extra mile to ensure that Wild Turkey ads aren't being marketed towards kids or towards Alcoholics Anonymous podcasts, is something that I think historically hasn't had a lot of attention paid to it. And now it needs to be sort of common set moving forward, no matter what. This is the structure we have in place to proactively make sure that we're combing content for these, to avoid these types of situations, combing calendars to make sure we're avoiding these, but also to have a plan in place to immediately retract and have messaging in place to really relate to the consumer when you have messed up.
So on this one, it's sort of interesting though, because what I see that's unique is it's sort of inverted. Instead of having like an ad showed up on a programmatic exchange that they just didn't catch, and then it was bad timing and hit, like wild turkey on an AA podcast. Okay, that's kind of a tech problem, and there need to be tech-driven solutions. When there's a partnership involved, then it does feel a little bit tone deaf unless the Dallas Cowboys have decided that they are like a vocal Second Amendment brand, and they really want to be digging into this. My thought would be they had enough information before the most recent tragedy that they should have decided before that, is this something we really want to stand behind or not? Or did they just get a deal done too quickly and not have a vetting process? Now, the other thing that's inverted here is normally we're talking about the brand associates with content, and they didn't really think about it enough. But in this case, the Dallas Cowboys took the money. They got sponsored, and so they didn't have a vetting process for who they were going to accept, which is a little bit of a different thing because we talk about brand safety and suitability, but what is the duty of a publisher to decide whether or not there's something toxic about the people they're taking money from? I think that's maybe a new conversation that we're having here, and an interesting one. But my thought would be, what changed? I know there was an event, but we've been having a series of tragedies over the last few years that have increased. What new information did they really need to decide whether or not this was an affiliation they were comfortable with or not?
Well, yeah, but at the same time, like I think we're separating the name, the brand, the name of the brand with the mission behind the brand, and the mission behind the brand is to support veterans. So I think that it's a more complex issue than what you're stating as maybe.
Yeah, and I think it might just be a timing thing, and just having, a product like the AK-47 espresso blend, that's the thing that could strike some folks the wrong way. And just in
totally agree.
In listening and reading about it a bit, it strikes at the heart of what we're doing with the Media Roundtable, where the reaction on the other direction was, well, so what? You need to not be so sensitive and not get upset about this kind of stuff. And it was like, oh my gosh, I'm listening to the exact thing we're trying to address with the Media Roundtable, where one podcast I listened to, their reaction to people being upset by this partnership the day after a shooting is to go, you all are idiots and shouldn't even be upset, and this is going to sell more coffee. And you just go, oh my goodness, can we try to come together a little bit?
Right. I mean, obviously it was incredibly insensitive. I'm not debating that at all. It's my point was more towards like the name of the brand doesn't necessarily relate to the mission behind the brand, and they should, in my opinion, like reconsider what their name would be in light of events that have happened more recently and over the course of the last several years and decades.
Well, and what you're highlighting, Jennifer, is what you and I know is what's always missing, which is nuanced information, right? They're called Black Rifle. What do they actually stand for? But are they actually standing for that? Or are they also exploiting the, advocacy for gun ownership? This is a messy, this is not a clear cut.
So complicated. There's so much nuance to it.
All right. So I guess my question is, what did the Dallas Cowboys do when they got the backlash? Did they drop the sponsorship, or did they double down?
I didn't see what Dallas said, but Black Rifle told Fox News in an interview that they're doubling down, saying, look, we donated $1.2 million in cash to charitable organizations, $3 million worth of coffee products to first responders and active military personnel. They're unabashedly going towards the gun thing. And from what I understand, that's exactly who these people are. That's what they stand for. I just moved to Tennessee, and I see Black Rifle coffee stuff everywhere, which is very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the folks at Black Rifle, and I don't want to be too quick to judge, but it does appear that you've got an organization that is using as a marketing tool, tapping into the enthusiasm for gun rights, and then doing something very charitable that we can all get behind and going, wait a minute, it's for the veterans. But that doesn't mean there's no exploitation happening between those two things. Now, do the ends justify the means? I don't know. But clearly the Dallas Cowboys have not made a big statement because we can't find it saying that they're renouncing or backing away from. So maybe they did the math and said, we're okay with this. The ends do justify the means, and the timing was poor, but they stand behind it. We'll see how this thing plays out over time. Okay, we've got time for just one more story. And Jennifer, I'm going to tee you up for this one. Now, there's news out that misinformation was added as a GARM brand safety element. Now, you've probably heard about GARM. If you've listened to this podcast before, it is Global Advertisers for Responsible Media. It's a consortium of really the who's who in marketing. It's like 90+% of the comm spending in the world because they're associated with the World Federation of Advertisers. And we have been doing a lot that you've heard from us on with our partnership with Barometer and things like, and to give advertisers more tools to understand how they can evaluate what they're going to sponsor. So, Jennifer, do you want to talk about what the implications are that they have now added misinformation as a component?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, historically, they've had the Evil 11, as brand marketers refer to them. They're designed 11 elements that could be risky for a brand if they're marketing across platforms that have those types of messages. And they are elements like illegal drugs and explicit sexual content, arms and ammunition, terrorism, et cetera. And so GARM wanted to provide a tool for brand, or a framework for brand advertisers to really demonetize if these one of these 11 elements doesn't fit with their brand values. And it was in a lot of the discussions leading up to the election in 2020, and has continued to be an element that's ever present in the news, this idea of misinformation and under misinformation, disinformation, and the difference between those two things. Misinformation would be presenting information like it's factually true, even though you know it's not, whether you're sharing that publicly or you're sort of passing along a story that you know isn't true. And disinformation is more, I don't know if this is true, but I'm passing it on. And so there's more of an active or a passive role in those, but they both fall under this umbrella. Whereas now GARM has identified that this type of content can be dangerous to users, and marketers need to be aware of this. Hot take for marketers. Through the work that we're doing with Barometer, we've added this to contextualized tracking for the audio tool that we built for podcast. And we are talking to we're talking to clients of Barometer to make sure that they're aware that misinformation can be dangerous, and talking to each of them individually to understand sort of how do they feel about this. Are they okay with people spreading this type of information? Are they not? What works for their brand, what doesn't? And I mean, obviously we're finding, this may not be a surprise, we're finding that brands are very sensitive to this, and they don't want to be actively associated with outlets that are spreading information that isn't true or that hasn't been researched or confirmed.
Well, it's an important topic, and I think that we've hit a cacophony of concern around misinformation since the 2020 election. Brands started becoming a lot more fearful that they are sponsoring words that are not true. Now, the reality is this has been with us since before America was a country. Disinformation campaigns have always been at play. Misinformation is always a thing, and sometimes it's negligence, and sometimes it's with harmful intent. So I'm glad to see GARM recognizing this, and obviously these are people that we're working with very closely, because we're trying to not just take the framework, which is theoretical, but we're actually trying to help develop solutions so that you can apply this stuff. The hard thing with misinformation is that it can be so subjective. I mean, all this can really be subjective if you want perfection, but it's one thing to count swear words or decide that certain terms should not be said or topics should not be discussed. It's another thing to say whether 3 news sources reporting a thing are true and another 3 news sources reporting a thing are untrue. That's where things get really difficult. So I applaud GARM for going there. I'd like to learn more about where they're directing people. We know it's hard and nobody's really got a corner on it. And I think we've even seen an inability for AI to solve for this kind of thing. In addition to the work that we're doing with Barometer, that's why we partnered with Ad Fontes, because they're the only ones that we know that are really taking this on, specifically in the channels where we operate. What were your thoughts on that, Jennifer?
No, I was going to bring up Ad Fontes. They're able to do it through a human approach, right, left, and center. Through the work that we're doing with Barometer, it is AI driven. It is contextualization. That being said, like right now we have debated sensitive social issues that we're flagging and tracking, and AI is able to ping those and then sort of understand the tonality attached to them, whether it's educational, glamorized, or dramatized. And I think that is the first step. That being said, you're right, it is very subjective, and to be able to track one is difficult in and of itself. But then the level 2 of confirming whether or not something is true or isn't true is, I don't want to say impossible, but it is a tall order, and I don't think anyone's figured it out. And so what we are going to have to do from sort of a tool perspective is provide exposure into this and let brands decide whether or not they can stand behind it or they don't want to stand behind it. And so flag for awareness and not make judgments unless it is definitively something that we can say is false.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, deciding what is true and what is not for media with an open internet is the problem of our age. I mean, that ties back to what we were talking about at the beginning with TikTok, right? So this is a problem. And so again, good for GARM for flagging it, but defining the problem is very different than solving the problem. And this one may be the hardest one to solve. So with that, I just want to say thank you to you all. We got into some heavy stuff today. It wasn't all just for kicks on this one, but you know what? We live in a world that's facing a lot of complex problems. And even if you're a performance marketer managing podcast campaigns, what you do matters. The decisions you make matter. So hopefully some of this discussion, helps give you a different perspective on some things you have to face in your week. So appreciate you all joining. Let's do this again. And as always, this show is dedicated to our mission of mobilizing marketers to advance truth and civility in journalism. We want you to not just know the news, but also to use it for good. And if you're a marketer looking to balance your business objectives with your brand values, reach out to our agency. It's called Oxford Road. You just go to oxfordroad.com and subscribe to our weekly newsletter, The Influencer, which Kyle is editor-in-chief of. Special thanks to Bianca, Stu, Kyle, Jennifer, and the team at Podcast One. And as always, influence responsibly.